So starting off our list in at number 10 with President JFK, on November 22nd, 1963, the 35th president was assassinated in Dallas, Texas while riding in a presidential motorcade. This assassination shocked the entire world. The president was expected to be buried at the Kennedy family plot in Massachusetts, but his wife said he belongs to the people, so he is going to be buried at the Arlington National Cemetery where people are free to visit his gravesite. There is actually an internal flame at his grave that has been burning since his burial in 1963. That's pretty interesting. Next up, number 9, we have Johnny Cash. The man dressed in black passed away on September 12, 2003 from diabetes, and he was buried next to his wife June Carter Cash at the Hendersonville Memorial Gardens in Tennessee. Their gravestones are marked by a simple tombstone that lists their last names along with the phrases "I walk the line" and "Wildwood Flower." This famous gravesite draws a steady number of mourners who travel to the hills of Tennessee to pay their respects. Bruce Lee punches into number 8. Bruce Lee and his son Brandon Lee are buried side by side at the Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle, Washington. This kung fu master unexpectedly died at the age of 32 years old from swelling in the brain caused by an allergic reaction to painkillers. It's insane. Since his death in 1973, thousands of visitors visit his grave every single year, and because of this, shrubs were planted around his grave to prevent visitors from trampling on the other grave sites in the cemetery. Our Frank Sinatra makes its way into number 7. This legendary singer died on March 14, 1998 from a fatal heart attack, and he is now buried in Desert Memorial Park in Palm Springs, California. He was buried with a bottle of Jack Daniels and a pack of Camel cigarettes, and the lyrics "The best is yet to come" is engraved onto his tombstone. Next up, number 6, we have Jim Morrison. This rock legend unfortunately died in Paris on July 3rd, 1971 of heart failure. Every day, hordes of tourists visit his gravestone. It's covered by graffiti from his crazy fans. Cemetery staff attempted to clean the graffiti, and now they've replaced the metal barricades around it just to protect it. Now at number 5 is Princess Diana's grave. The Princess of Wales died in August 1997 as a result of the injuries that was sustained in a car crash in Paris. She is buried at the Spencer family estate in North Hampshire on Round Oval Island. Once a year between July and September, visitors are given the opportunity to visit her grave, although no one is allowed to set foot on the island. From the edge of the lake, you can see an urn, but no headstone or gravesite. Shakespeare makes his debut at number 4. He is without a doubt the most famous English language writer in history. Shakespeare lived from 1564 to 1616, and even till this day, thousands of people visit his gravesite every single year to pay their respects. His tomb is located in Starford upon Avon in Warwickshire, England, at the Holy Trinity Churchyard. His grave is famously for having a curse engraved onto his gravestone, which Shakespeare wrote himself. It reads, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." I actually visited his gravestone, and reading those words actually gave me the chills. And fun fact for you guys, Danny's hometown is like 20-30 minutes away from Shakespeare's gravestone. Marilyn Monroe comes on this list, number 3. The world was stunned when they heard the news that Marilyn Monroe had died from an overdose in 1962. She was the iconic sex symbol in the 60s, but her final resting place was intended to be modest and private. However, because of her popularity, thousands of visitors are drawn to her grave. Actually, Hugh Hefner is buried beside her, and that's because he bought the site back in 1992 for $75,000, so he could spend an eternity beside Playboy's first playmate. In at number 2 spot, we have the king of pop. We're talking about Michael Jackson. He was buried in Holy Terrace section of the Great Mausoleum in Forest Lawn Cemetery in Glendale, California back in July of 2009. This is actually a famous final resting place for many other Hollywood celebrities, and it attracts well over 1 million visitors every single year. However, the area that Michael Jackson is in is a private section, and it is closed off to the public, but thousands of people come every day. They leave flowers outside of the mausoleum. The king of rock and roll makes its way into number 1 spot. Elvis Presley is an absolute legend who paved the way for other musicians. He died of a prescription drug overdose in August 1977. He was first buried in a mausoleum in Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis, Tennessee, but his body was later moved to Graceland Graceland because vandals and thieves tried to steal his remains. Although he's been dead for 4 decades, 600,000 people every single year still visit him. So if you buy a ticket to Graceland, his grave is a part of the Graceland tour, and I can tell you from a personal experience, the tour is well worth the money. I got to see the home that he grew up in, I got to see the home that he died in, I got to see his grave. It was a fascinating experience. I give my tributes to him.
Blink and you'll miss it, but if you look closely, you'll see that our number 10 was murdered by human wolves. 1. Any gravestone outlining murder freaks me out, and 2. What the actual F are human wolves? So I was thinking that maybe it was something along the lines of werewolves. Now this is something that it seems that the residents of Conemaugh, Oklahoma, where you can find the grave, think. In fact, the grave has been subject to many an urban legend. The official story of the gravestone of Catherine Cross is that she had an illegal abortion and died. Her devastated parents considered her body to have been torn to shreds by a bad doctor, or wolf. Another terrifying murder tombstone, we have the headstone of Princess Doe at number 9. The body of a teenager was found at Cedar Ridge Cemetery along Route 94 in New Jersey in 1982. The girl was thought to be between 14 and 18 years old, and her cause of death was blunt force trauma. While her face was not recognizable, it was clear that the girl came from a reasonably affluent background. Despite that, nobody in the area reported a teen as missing. Her gravestone is sad and scary in equal parts. It reads, Princess Doe, missing from home, dead amongst strangers, remembered by all, born ? Found July 15th, 1982. Now the stone is a living reminder that her killer, or indeed killers, are still out there. A spooky death rhyme makes these gravestones even spookier at number 8. This headstone reads, It does my heart a world of good to see you in a box of wood, aka a coffin. Now the owner of their headstone wants you to die, and that, yeah, it freaks me out, I can't lie. That or the person who organised the grave is confessing to murder, which also isn't great. Chill out though guys, it turns out this headstone is just a Halloween decoration. I should have known because I did see the creepy cobwebs in the background and it was just too good to be true. Coming into number 7, we have Baby Monster. I feel like I could be a good baby monster. I feel like this image was in our thumbnail for part 1, but I didn't include it in the actual video, so let's talk about this somewhat terrifying and cryptic baby monster tombstone. It seems that this tiny devil lived for just over 3 months and somehow managed to garner a bit of a rep in its short time on Earth. In actuality, whilst this does seem like the final resting place of a wee beastie, it seems that actually the tombstone can be found at the Saar Pioneer Cemetery in Washington. The story is that the child's surname was actually Monster, which is a bit unfortunate. I don't know, I could get on board with being called Rebecca Monster actually, it might be better than Rebecca Felgate. I shall henceforth be known as Rebecca Monster. This grave tells a horrible story at number 6. So here the tombstone reads, Eugene, found dead in 1929, buried 1964. So like, wait, if Eugene's body was found in 1929, what exactly was going on with it for 35 years? Well sadly, Eugene was a black man found dead by the side of the road in Ohio at a time when black human rights were not equally considered or treated with much respect. It seems that poor Eugene was then embalmed and put on display at the Littleton Funeral Home, where he became somewhat of a tourist attraction. I mean, how sad is that? Eventually in the mid-60s, he was finally laid to rest. Now if anyone's gonna haunt their grave, I would imagine it would be Eugene. Sometimes actions speak louder than words, and this grave is giving off one pretty scary physical message at number 5. Yeah, so this is George's Rodenbach's grave. Sometimes people are dead and buried, but George's seems to be suggesting that he is otherwise. Just look at him, climbing out of his grave like the creep that he is. Imagine being alone in that graveyard at night and seeing old George's tombstone, like yikes. Stay dead, Georges, get back in there, your time is done. So with some of these tombstones we've done a little bit of digging to find out the story behind them, but no need with this absolute shocker at number 4, as basically the full story's laid out for us pretty damn clearly, and oh my god, it's terrifying. Wondering how Mary Jane McCoon died? Just consult her headstone for further detail. So, as it reads, she was bitten by a rabid coyote, developed rabies, became violent, was smothered with a feather bed. When her husband returned, she and her unborn child were dead and buried. Like, TMI gravestone, you could just say loving mother, happy wife. I feel like maybe they were just kind of frank in the 1850s. Also, poor rabid pregnant Mary was only 17 when she died by the looks of things, which is really sad. Up next at number 3, we have the sad headstone of Ironfoot Eva. It seems that Eva was a 300-pound giantess and sideshow performer. Her tombstone can be found at Old Trappers Lodge in California, and it's scary for 2 reasons. 1, the cold dead eyes of her statue, and 2, the fact that the inscription suggests that she was murdered. It reads, Ironfoot Eva, 1800 to 1830, 300-pound giantess, poetess, singer and blacksmith, killed on her wedding day by unknown riflemen. Well, there's that. Ooh, very very sad at number 2, we simply have specimens. This tombstone sends a pretty distinct and horrifyingly clinical message. Found in a mental health hospital cemetery in Columbus, Ohio, there are actually a pair of gravestones marked as simply specimens. What remains and who they belong to, we don't know. I'd feel pretty creeped out if I saw these tombstones to myself. It's largely suspected that the so-called specimens are the mutilated remains of bodies used for dissection. Like, call them by their name. So finally, this is the scariest headstone that I have ever seen at number 1. Now, a lot of these stones have told stories, but this one is enacting the murder scene. This just makes me so sad. We have Italino Lacamelli's gravestone. Italino was just a boy of 5 years old when he was murdered in 1925. He was happily in the garden playing with his hoop when he was murdered in broad daylight by a madman. His grave shows the moments before he dies, a happy boy with a hoop just doing his thing, but then he's chased by the scary hands of a killer coming to drag him into the underworld. Oh my god, like, I'm not okay. Okay, coming in at number 10, we have the planes that they died in. Okay, this gives me the serious creeps. In a graveyard deep in the woods surrounding the Amari Air Base, you will find a pilot's graveyard where the bodies of Soviet-era airmen who died are buried with the tail fin of the planes that they crashed in. It's really, really sad, honestly. The tail of the plane that they crashed in is their tombstone. The effect of the fins is that the graveyard kind of looks like it's filled with ground sharks. It's truly haunting and very real when you realize that these are the actual wreckages and they're marking the graves of the dead. It becomes horrifyingly imaginable. Coming in at number 9, we have the Circle of Life. The Circle of Life is a beautiful thing. As we know from the first law of thermodynamics, energy can't be created or destroyed, just transferred. When we die, the energy we had in our bodies is transferred into the soil. We're worm food. The worms are then of course eaten by birds and so on and so forth. It's the Circle of Life. While this is a lovely notion, the gravestone makes the Circle of Life sound rather literal and terrifying. Having passed in 1728 at the age of 42, what does JSD get on his gravestone? Oh, here lies Scott, left here to rot. Very, very literal. Coming in at number 8, we have The Mistake. Trial by mob is never ideal, especially when that trial gets you killed. It seems that George Johnson was murdered by locals who only realized the error of their ways when it was too late. The Boot Hill Cemetery in Arizona is famous for being the final resting place for a number of Wild West characters, including the McLaury brothers and Billy Clayton. But this point on this list is all about George. George bought a stolen horse without realizing that it was stolen. He was then sentenced to death despite him being totally innocent. His handmade 2 message reads, "Here lies George Johnson hanged by mistake in 1882. He was right, we were wrong, but we strung him up and now he's gone." Descriptive. Spooky. Scary or kind of funny, you decide. We have the beard at number 7. So I mean, persecution is never funny, like absolute hardline no to persecution, but persecuted for wearing a beard. With that information presented along with this lovely stone carving, I have to say I was strangely darkly amused, or I guess the right word is bemused. Poor Joseph Palmer loved his beard even though it was not in fashion in his lifetime in the early 1800s. It seems his local preacher even accused him of consorting with the devil because of his facial hair. In 1830, Palmer was attacked by a mob outside Fitchburg in Massachusetts. Why? Because he had a beard. They were armed with razors and scissors and they attempted to forcibly shave him. He ended up stabbing 2 of his attackers, lightly if there is such a thing as a light stabbing. He was then jailed and placed in solitary confinement for 15 months. Now his tombstone depicts him with his lovely beard and I'm really happy that he stood up for his facial hair to the very end. Long live the beard. Coming in at number 6, I'm not sure what to name this point other than the pie? What a horrible way to go. Not only did Sir Geoffrey Hudson get a piddly little grave plaque, it is also very descriptive in the creepiest of ways. It seems that Sir Geoffrey had dwarfism, but still made it to the age of 63, which in the 1600s was great, even for those born without a defect. How did Sir Geoffrey go though? Well, his grave says it all. A dwarf presented in a pie to King Charles I. What a way to go. To be fair, the grave doesn't actually make it clear if this is the way he died or if this was the way he was best known. Either way, it is pretty disconcerting. King Charles I, by the way, was said to be wicked and tyrannical. He was bareheaded, so he kind of got what was coming to him. His coffin's in St George's Chapel in Windsor, UK. Coming in at number 5, we have the explosion. I feel like the descriptive gravestones are absolutely the gnarliest. There are a lot of them on this list. Have a listen to the tale of poor Ellen Shannon. Her stone says that she died aged 26 after being fatally burned on the 21st of March 1870 by the explosion of a lamp filled with Danforth's so-called non-explosive burning fluid. I do enjoy that the gravestone makes it clear the brand at fault and calls them out for their false advertising. This is like the sassy TripAdvisor or Twitter comment of the olden days. Although, to be totally fair, the poor woman did die, so it makes it pretty sad. If you want to see this spooky grave for yourself, it is in Girard Cemetery in Pennsylvania. Coming in at number 4, we have the Weeping Woman of Michigan. Okay, like first and foremost, this statue is terrifying from the off. A giant stone woman standing with her arms spread. I can certainly live without her. So this is a statue of the Virgin Mary who has been placed in Battle Creek's Oak Hill Cemetery. Legend has it that she cries real tears every Sunday night, and also apparently on Halloween and during a full moon. The under of her eyes are found to be wet on frequent occasions, despite there being no discernible reason. I guess no discernible reason other than she's a spooky statue, and why not? Maybe she's haunted, maybe she's just sad. What scary message is she trying to send? I'm not sure I want to know. We have this killer at number 3, we have Robert Clay Allison. Now it seems that Robert Clay Allison died aged 47 in 1887. Was probably actually pretty young back then. Perhaps it was someone seeking revenge, as it seems that good old Rob was a bit of a social justice warrior, and that's to put it politely. To put it less politely, he was likely a murderer. His grave reads, "He never killed a man that didn't need killing." Either way, who died and made Robert chief of executions? Maybe it was someone that he killed. The swine. Coming in at number 2, we have What They Know. What happens after we die? Well, there isn't really anyone alive who can definitely answer that question. The only people that know are the billions of people who have died over the course of history, also including the owner of this gravestone. Simple yet effective, it reads, "Now I know something that you don't." Ooh, well they very well just might, or they might not, depending on what actually happens. I like the mysticism though. If you were anywhere near as disgruntled as Mary C. Dolency, then you may have left us some terse words on your gravestone to your neighbours too. Finally coming into number 1, we have the curse. Ooh dear, Mary was a bit of a crazy cat lady stereotype. She hated her neighbours, she would shine lights in their faces and start feuds, and yes, she had a lot of pets, although she did leave all of her money to the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Animal Cruelty. So actually, that really was pretty nice of her. Good on ya. But sadly, she did also leave something not so nice behind, a curse to her community. Hooray! On her tombstone is written, "May eternal damnation be upon those in Whalingport who, without knowing me, have maliciously vilified me. May the curse of God be upon them and theirs." I'm sorry, what? Do you want to chill out? May the curse of God be upon them. Ooh. It seems though that her tombstone is all talk. Locals say they don't believe they're cursed, which is good news.